Now, you've had two wonderful speakers, and Miss Madonna was the principal at the high school where I used to work before I retired. Retirement is wonderful. And just to let you know a little history about me, um, my great-grandparents helped to settle the town here. I don't know if you're familiar with Chancey Road. That was my great-grandfather. Geiger Road. That was my grandfather. Um, Tucker Road. That was my daddy. And I've been married to this gentleman sitting right over here for almost 50 years now. And he was on the city council for 29 years, and they named a skateboard park after him. So we're doing pretty good. We sure can't deny Zephyrhills, that's for sure. I want to tell you a little bit about my dad. It's actually my stepfather. My dad died when I was 9 months old, so I never really knew him. But Papa was the one that took care of me for my whole entire life. And his parents, they came from Wesley Chapel. Now Wesley Chapel's just a little bit west of here. And he had 7 brothers. Well, their mother died of breast cancer when she was 36 years old, so there was 8 boys for them to take care of. And my dad, on occasion, would make a little moonshine in order to make ends meet, because they had to take care of those boys. And he worked for IA Cruising, and they did lumber and stuff, and he was a saw sharpener. So when he was sharpening saws for them out in the woods, they were usually in places where there were cypress swamps or whatever, and he would sharpen the saws. And when he had a spare moment and there was no saws to sharpen, he would go out and kill alligators, skin them out, and roll up the hides and take them home. Because the gator hide man would come by too, and that was another thing that they did to make ends meet. Now, on occasion, somebody would call him and tell him that there was a gator pulling down some cows or something out there in the pasture, so could he come out and take care of the gators for him. And he would do that, and every once in a while he'd find a new spot to put a moonshine still. Now he was very familiar with the law enforcement in town, and they all had their jobs to do, and they knew Papa was running shine, but they never could catch him. And on occasion, one in particular, they had busted up a moonshine still out west of Chapel ways, out by New River, out by the library out there in one of the cypress swamps. And Papa just happened to be out there putting his steel back together, and the sheriff and the county commissioner was riding their horses out there talking about it. And the sheriff was saying to the county commissioner, he said, I know that still belongs to Lonnie Tucker, but I couldn't prove it. And so Papa was out there real quiet, waiting for them to ride their horses on so he could finish putting his steel back together. And he always made preparations ahead of time, because if you had to leave the steel in a hurry, well, when the revenuers would come by down the road and they would stop you and they would ask you if you seen anybody coming that way out of the cypress swamp, and he would say, well, no. And he would always keep an extra pair of pants and a pair of shoes so he could switch out so he wouldn't have wet, muddy shoes and clothes. So that was another thing he did to keep out of jail. But anyway, the girls were telling me when they asked me to come over here, one of them said, well, remember what, she said, I heard this story about your papa shooting the preacher. And I said, Lord, no, he didn't shoot the preacher. He sort of shot at him a little bit, but he aimed real high. Well, Papa had a grove over there on Island Boulevard, and I think the name of the place over there now is Belmont Condominiums or whatever. Well, we used to own that land out there, and So he was out there and he was working in the orange grove, and people were hunting doves, and there was a baited field across the street, and so Papa was out there, and every once in a while somebody would shoot from that side of the road over there, and shot would fall all around him, and he would get a little concerned, and because pellets had broke Grandma's window on a couple occasions. She had a house down there, and so he yelled and he said, "Hey, over there, don't be shooting to the west. There's people over here." Well, he went on about his way and worked a little bit more, and next thing you know, they're shooting again. Pellets falling all around him. He's saying, "Hey, don't shoot to the west. There's people and cows over here." Well, a little bit later, he's doing the same thing. Shooting, the pellets falling all around, so he goes out of there and he gets his gun out of the car, and he proceeds to shoot back. Well, all of a sudden, you hear this voice coming from the east that says, "Don't shoot over this way. There's people over here. This is Reverend Roselle of First Baptist Church." And for those of you that have been here for a while, you might have known Reverend Roselle. But my daddy said, "I don't care if you're God Almighty himself. You keep shooting over here, next time I'm shooting lower." But we were able to go back to the church after that. We didn't get excommunicated or whatever they do to you. But anyway, and he did have this thing about Yankees. Now, I know you guys are really sweet people, and we love you to death, and we wouldn't have Zephyrhills without our northern snowbirds. But he just loved to have a good time with you guys, and like I say, he did rattlesnakes a lot, and so every Wednesday afternoon he would go out rattlesnake hunting, and on Saturdays, and he would take those snakes and he would wind them up in the back of the car, make them look like they were in coils, and he would bring them out because he worked at the hardware store in Zephyrhills for 35 years. This was after most of his moonshining days. And so he had a friend, Bill Smith, and Miss Madonna Wise was just talking about Mr. Bill Smith earlier. He lived out at Wesley Chapel. And he was my last source of moonshine in the area, and he just passed away here lately. But anyway, they had come back and they had parked over by Moody's Hardware, and it happened to be on Founder's Day. Well, the railroad track went through the middle of town there, and right where Village Inn is at now was the depot, and there was a parking area there. Well, Papa and them got out of the truck, and they're fixing to go over to Smitty's to the restaurant next door. And all of a sudden, you see 5 or 6 northerners coming up, and they were going to the restaurant too. Well, Bill said, "Oh, I see Mr. Schreiner's car over there." Said, "Didn't he want a rattlesnake skin to make a headband out of him?" And Papa said, "Well, yes, he did." He said, let's take one of those snakes and we'll put it over in his car." Well, Bill gets a Kroger bag out of the back of the car, and he proceeds to go around. Papa opens the tailgate, and he has a garden rake with the iron tins across the end of it. And so he pulls the snake out. Well, the snake fell on the ground. Well, all these people see the snake, and they're going, "Rattlesnake, rattlesnake." Well, my dad gets it on the end of the rake, and he's moving it around, and he's telling Bill, get the bag, get the bag. So finally Bill gets the bag, and he's bringing it around, and he's trying to get the snake in the bag, and Papa's moving it back and forth, and people are getting closer, and they move it towards him, and he's backing up, and then they're back and forth, and finally he gets the snake, which was dead, into the bag. And so the people ask him, says, "Well, what are you going to do with that snake?" And he says, "Well, I'll put it in that man's car over there." And they said, "Well, why?" He says, "I don't like him." So he proceeds to go across the street, and of course, at that time he didn't have air conditioning windows. Everybody had their windows down, and He just tossed the bag in the back of the car. Well, him and Bill went on to the restaurant. It wasn't too long. Here comes the police. And they're walking up, and these people are outside with them, and they're pointing and pointing at my dad, you know. And Chief Allen, bless his heart, walks in, and he says, "Lonnie Tucker, I might have known it was you." He said, "Did you put that snake in Mr. So-and-so's car?" And he said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Why did you put it in there?" He said, "Well, he wanted skin for a hat band." So that's the end of that story. He didn't get arrested, but he got a coming up, you know. So he would, Chief Allen always was getting after him. There was another time he shot off the starter pistol in the restaurant to see if this guy really needed a handicap sticker or not, and he didn't, because he threw down his walker and ran out of the restaurant. Of course, when he came over, Chief Allen said, "Lonnie Tucker, I might have known it was you." And he said it was just a starter pistol. But he was quite the colorful character. And I don't know if I have any more stories. I think that's about mine. Next. Are we next?